Right, I think I can start. Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm amazed that so many people weren't put off by the word data, so that's good. So my name's Caroline. I'm a publisher at Cambridge University Press, which is an educational publisher. So we publish all sorts of textbooks and on weird and wonderful subjects. We publish for GCSEs and also we have a large English language teaching department, and that's where I work. So I work in a department that publishes English language teaching materials for adults. So that's mainly sort of university level students and up to working professionals. And so notice that data analyst or statistician, not in my job title. I'm not by no means an expert on data analysis, but I'm very interested in what data can tell us about how learners are learning. So my role really as a publisher is to investigate what's happening in the English language teaching world and to carry out market research with teachers and students studying English, and to find out what kind of materials we can develop, courses, materials, to help the teacher teach and the learner learn English, which is using current methodologies and things like that. And a lot of that market research that we do is very much us going into schools, observing classes, talking to teachers, focus groups, conversations, deep dive interviews. All of these kinds of market research are what we typically do. And what's happening is that more and more learning, especially with adults, more and more language learning is taking place online. So parts of courses happening online in the digital space. Obviously, the classroom is still hugely important in English language teaching, and it's for the majority, that's where most of the learning takes place. But there is this other bit of learning that's happening online. And so I was really interested in finding out what we can find out from the online learning that we can't get from face-to-face interviews and conversations. Because obviously whenever you're talking to somebody in a focus group or in a conversation, it's an opinion. They're telling you what they think they do. They're talking about what their perception is of what they're doing and how they're learning. So looking at data, it removes that sort of affective factor, and that's why I was interested in looking at this. So we're lucky at Cambridge University Press because we have a learning management system. And there's a huge amount of content happening on this learning management system. So at the moment, we've got over 700,000 active users. And we've got about 26 different courses, English language teaching courses, for adults and teenagers. And I'm going to focus on the adult part of that. So we've got about 250,000 adult learners in there that this data is based on. So we've got kind of two different types of course. We've got online, what we call online workbooks. Now these are really, it's like what you would traditionally give as homework in the English language teaching world. So you'd often give sort of extra grammar and vocabulary practice in a workbook, and the student would take that home, they'd fill it in, they'd bring it into school to be marked the next day. A lot of that, the trend over the last sort of 10 years or so, is for that type of homework to actually be done online. And so that's what we call an online workbook. So it gets graded automatically and the teacher can go in and see how the students have done. The other type of course that we have is a course called Touchstone. The name is pretty irrelevant here, but it's interesting because in this online course, some of the actual face-to-face, what would normally be done in the classroom, the face-to-face learning, actually takes place online as well. So some of the class will be with the teacher face-to-face, and a large part of it will happen in the online learning management system. So actually, the online course here is a kind of much bigger, there's a lot more content in there. And it's a different type of learning. So this, looking at all of these interactions that happen online, allows us as publishers to really see what's happening when the students are studying online. and it allows us to get some really valuable insights into that and what's happening. Okay, so I'm not going to just pump loads of data and facts and figures at you. I'm going to share some of the insights that we've got, and then what I want to do is open up a conversation about what they can and can't tell us about what the way in which students are engaging online. Okay, so I started with 3 kind of key questions before I started looking at the data. I wondered whether there was anything we could learn about when students study online. I wondered about maybe how they study online. And here I was thinking, okay, so can we learn about maybe what devices they're using to do their online work? Can I find anything about the frequency, about how often they go online? And then I was really interested, especially as a publisher, in what type of content they prefer. There's a lot of different content out there and different ways in which students are learning. I was interested in finding about whether we could tell what their preferences are from our LMS data. So then, had those questions, and I kind of dived in to a massive ocean, which is quite lonely. I was wearing clothes when I dived in, though, unlike this chap. And there was an awful lot to wade through, and so I've kind of pulled out about 5 key findings. Okay, first of all, bit of context for you. This is a little bubble map that tells you where the majority of our users are. So this is quite useful as a context for you. So you can see that we've got lots and lots of users in Mexico and Latin America. We've got another large group in Europe, Western Europe and Turkey and the Middle East. And that's where the majority of our users are. And they are mainly universities. So it's mainly universities that will adopt a kind of this online course. But there are some private language schools where you've got working professionals as well. So it's a combination, but the majority are going to be university students that are using the course. Oh, and another important thing to mention actually is that the people that are using the learning management system are likely to be using the same material for a number of years. So we'll get a lot of people in the platform who are using it for from 1 to 4 years, because we have courses that are over several years of study. Okay. All right, so first question, I'm going to throw this open to guesses. Thinking about what I've just told you about who the students are, when do you think they are most likely to access the online course? So thinking about who the students are and what I've told you about the courses. Any guesses? I don't know who said that. Okay. So this is in terms of the academic year. I should have specified, sorry. I was going to ask this first. Sorry. Okay, so what we've got here, we've got 2 lines. The orange one is Latin America. And this is the academic year from September through to August. So we've got the orange line being Latin America and the black one being Europe and the Middle East. And what you can see is that you get a big, big dip in December. Why would we get the dip? So the dip in Latin America. Yeah. Yeah, I think we can safely assume that is the December Christmas holiday. We don't see the same sort of dip in Europe and the Middle East. I mean, that's a pretty kind of regular flow of activity throughout the year. And we get a big peak in Latin America in May. Any ideas why that might be?
Exams.
Could be. Could be. Anything else? The fact is, I don't know. But the fact that I don't know is interesting. I mean, it could be exams, but I would expect exams to be later. And I'd expect exams to be them doing loads and loads of practice tests, for example. We don't necessarily see that. What we do know, and this is where you kind of have to combine what data's telling you and what your interviews are telling you, we do know that a lot of the schools who've adopted this sort of blended learning approach and the online material is that they have to make content mandatory for the students to pass their level. They have to make it mandatory to get the students to do it very often. So it may, and what they've also told us is that often students wait until the end of the school year and then they do a mass of, so they're told that they've got to do a certain amount of content and then they just pack it all into a very short time at the end of the year. So that might be what's going on there. But the fact is, I don't really know, but it raises the question for me and it makes me want to go out and find out more. So I'd take that information and go out and test and find out what is going on. Okay, so you've already answered the second question, which was what time of day. So this is what we see during the day. So your guess was right. Majority of activity is happening in the evening. And that's globally, and we've kind of made it so that all the time zones match up somehow. Somebody that is a data analyst did a very clever thing. So we're looking at the most activity happening in the evening. No surprises there. These are adult students. That's what's likely to happen. I am kind of surprised by how much goes on during the day, actually. I mean, from 8 o'clock in the morning. It's quite surprising. So I'd want to delve a bit more into that as well and find out what's going on there, because I wouldn't have expected to see so much activity during the day. It might be we have a couple of language schools who they have on site, so they might have a lot of working professionals, and on site they'll have language labs, and the students, it's up to them to go in and do the online study. So they might go in during the day, they might have some kind of time off for work to study, and they might be going in and doing their online study during work time. But it's not the majority, so it does surprise me that there's such a large amount during the day, actually. Okay. Right, on to how they access online. What device do you think they most use? Now, hang on, we're going to do a vote. So I'm going to give you 3 choices. So PC or Mac, smartphone and tablet. So who thinks PC or Mac is the most used device? Hands up. Right, okay, who thinks tablet? Okay, so I'm assuming the rest of you think smartphone, is that right? Okay. Okay, here's the result. So what surprises you?
Is that because your LMS isn't optimized for smartphones?
Oh, there's a plant. There's a plant in the room. It is exactly that. A few years ago, when we upgraded our system, we thought tablet, this is a trade secret now, we thought tablet was going to really take off. And so we actually optimized for tablet rather than smartphone. So, and this number has gone down over the last 3 years. It was even higher than, it was higher than that before, and smartphone was lower. So yes, you're absolutely right. It's not a great experience. But nevertheless, 11% still accessing it. Now there's something else that the data can't tell us. What you can say.
Are there any, is there an app that your learners can use to access the content?
No, not yet. Okay. Not yet. But the other thing to bear in mind here is we don't know whether this shows persistency. So we don't know if these people in this 11%, we don't know if they are consistently going in and using their smartphone to access the content, or whether they go in, they see it's not a very good experience, and they go out again. So there's still a lot to explore within these figures. The data on its own can't tell us everything, obviously. But also if we use this information alongside what we're learning in market research and our interviews, we're hearing that students, I'm talking, sort of university level students, they tend to be one or the other. They tend to have a preference, either smartphone or PC for their study. They tend to come down on one side or the other. And we also found that often they're a one computer household. I don't know if that is a phrase, but that's kind of how I see it. So in their home, they might be a family with several children, obviously parents, and there's only one computer available. So if they're doing their homework in the evening, they've got no choice actually but to use their smartphone because someone else might be using the computer. So we kind of need to pull all of this information together and essentially make these two things good experiences so that people have a choice. And that's what we've learned. So we learned that we backed the wrong horse. It was very difficult to predict, 5 years ago, or maybe it wasn't for some, but we found it difficult to predict what was going to happen. But now we can learn from this and sort of move forward and investigate a little bit further. I'm getting lost with my notes because I didn't put numbers on them. Beginner's error. Okay, right. Next question. What do you think is the average length of time that a learner will go online and study? So think of one session, the student goes online. How long do you think they spend online when they decide to go in and do online homework? Any guesses?
1 hour?
1 hour. Mm-hmm. Half an hour. Mm-hmm. 20 minutes. 2 hours. 2 hours. Okay. Yeah. I probably thought at least an hour. But the answer is around about this. The reason I've given you 3 is just because these are, as I mentioned before, these are quite different types of course. So remember, that is sort of very homeworky. And that one is where they're actually getting input online. So it's an online course. But still, the average amount of time spent in the online session is very similar. So 20 minutes. Now this is interesting because when we create the content, or when we created the content for these different materials, we were thinking about the syllabus and what they needed to get through, rather than the sort of chunks, how they might actually access that material. We were probably thinking like a book, like textbook style thinking. And so for the online course, for example, we were thinking hour and a half, probably going to spend an hour and a half, because that's what we know the institution wants them to do. But in reality, this is what we're looking at. Now, a couple of caveats, again, caveat with every single bit of data that comes out. We don't know if they're actually studying for those full 20 minutes. They could be going off making a cup of tea, coming back, going off having a Mars bar, coming back, probably not having a Mars bar because it's very probably culturally not what people eat around the world. But anyway, there's a lot we still don't know, is what I'm saying. But this in itself is really interesting and useful for us to know.
Basically, when you say that's the average time, is that the mean average? What's the spread? I mean, it could be that lots of people are spending longer,
yeah.
some people are spending
Yeah.
less.
I don't know, actually. That is basically pulling together all of the instances where someone has gone online. So this is so all of the people using that course across all the different levels. That is approximately how much. Yeah. So it's the mean, isn't it? So it's it's the mean. I don't know if that helps, but I don't know what the actual width of the spread is of the mean. I don't know, but that's a good one. I should find that out. That's why we kind of did it across 3, because I thought it might be unrepresentative to do just one type of course, but that's how it's coming out. But yeah, it needs more investigation. It does actually match with what people tell us as well. So it didn't really. Once I'd done quite a few interviews about a year ago and focus groups with teachers and students, I started to think, they're sort of slotting English in amongst so much other stuff that's going on in their lives. Because a lot of the students using these courses have got a major in a completely different subject area. So they might be studying engineering, but having to do English alongside it. So they've kind of got a priority subject to study, and English is just slotted in where it can be fitted in. So I guess it sort of tallies with that. 20 minutes is probably about what they're willing to spend on it. There's another thing that's missing from this, of course, and that's the frequency with which they're going in. So this might be 20 minutes a day, unlikely, could be 20 minutes a week, could be 20 minutes a month. Now the next step for us is to go in and follow a random group of users and follow how often they go in and they do this amount of time. So that's the next step, because we want to know about really their behaviour and their habits and what their preferred way of working is. Okay. Okay, so the next thing we wanted to look at was whether this question actually came out of talking to teachers who tell us that students get bored with using the same course over a long period of time. So I mentioned that often with these English language courses, they're doing level 1 year, level 2 the next year, level 3 the next year, and we don't change up the sort of pedagogical style across an English language course. So they're getting the same kind of structure and approach over 4 years of study potentially. So the teachers say that the students kind of can get a bit bored, and so there's more onus on the teacher to change things up a bit. So I thought, well, let's have a look and see whether we can see that in the online data. So this shows the engagement with each level. So again, what we've done here is we've taken, so that's 12 units is one level, okay? But we've taken all of the levels of the course and done a kind of average and grouped them. So this is pretty much what the level of engagement definitely descends over time. So by the time they get to unit 12, not as many, they're not using it as much, basically. They're not using the online material as much. They're not doing as much of the content as they were when they were so excited about the course, when they were doing unit 1. I'm interested does anyone have any idea what might be happening here?
Can I ask what the numbers are on the bottom? Is that time?
No, that's views, page views. So that's individual page views. So on average, Unit 1 got around, all of the content in Unit 1 got just over 4,000 openings of all the content, if you see what I mean. Any idea what's happening with Unit 7, sticking out a little bit there? Yeah.
There's a checkpoint when you get some sort of halfway qualification.
There is a checkpoint. Yes, there is. It's possible. Yep.
Beginning of the second semester.
Yeah, it's the beginning of the second semester very often. And actually, we actually produce splits. I don't know if this exists in other types of education, but we do split editions. So some universities will just want to buy a split A, which is the first 6 units, and then they'll buy the second set, and that might be it might be a different group of students using it. So you get a kind of initial excitement, again, that's similar to what you get with Unit 1. Okay, we think that's what's happening. Right. Okay. On to content. Okay, so as I mentioned at the beginning, I was quite interested to know what type of content is most used. What I've tried to do here is sort of split the content types out for you into different areas. So core content would be vocabulary and grammar practice, essentially, sort of core to the syllabus. Tests speak for themselves. Video activities, these are activities that are based on a little kind of sitcom style set of videos that they can go in and watch. Pronunciation speaks for itself. Productive writing probably speaks for itself. Games, and then you've got extra practice. So for those, it's similar to the core content, but it's additional. Any guesses what is the most used type of content? Video? Tests. Any others? Yeah, I mean, that's what people tell us, actually. People were telling us, oh, students love the games, absolutely love that. So we did another analysis, pulled all the data together and looked at these different parts of the content and how many views they were getting. And this is what it came out as. By far, the core content is king, and then writing activities. Video, tests, games right at the bottom. So, bit of a surprise for us on that one in some ways. But then if you if you combine that knowledge with what you're learning from your market research, it starts to become a bit clearer. As I mentioned earlier, there are bits of the content that the teacher makes mandatory in order for the student to pass the course. Otherwise, they can't get them online. So that's this here. Similarly, writing activities tend to be what the teacher uses. Oh my goodness, I've only got 5 minutes. Okay. Whatever. So these tend to be the way that the teacher checks that the students have understood the language from the unit. So we can see why that becomes mandatory, that's mandatory. The rest, not mandatory. Even the tests aren't, because often the teachers will have they create their own tests, because cheating is a huge issue online. How do they cheat? Students just take pictures of the screen and then share them with the next cohort of students. So actually our tests aren't being used as much as they could. We've just added another set so that we can help to overcome this problem. But only 2 sets. They need a multitude, and they need randomizable tests. Games, very, very low. But the reason for the games being down there might be because they might be difficult to navigate to. They might not be that easy to find. There are all sorts of other reasons. And so, like I said, this gives us some little indicators. The data gives us indicators, but it acts like a springboard for us to ask other questions and investigate other things and why this is happening. So, yes, I did come to the end. So, my conclusion's really about data. It's useful in conjunction with other types of traditional market research, but it can't tell us everything. You have to have the context in order to make sense of it. And it is often a springboard for asking more questions. It points you in the direction of other questions that you could be asking. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Yes.
I have a question about that slide you shared with the 20, 21, 22-minute very stable use of content across the different types of interaction that you're offering learners. And has that fit back into the way if you are redesigning
Yes.
parts of these, or if you were to have that maybe?
Yes, it is, absolutely. And that's why this kind of thing is really useful to us. It's feeding back into the way that we conceptualize the next kind of batch of content that we develop, but we will test it. We were learning about user testing in that first session today. We'll be showing it to students, and we'll be asking them to feed in and tell us if this is about right. So yeah, it'll feed in, but it won't go untested. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Do the trends that you've shown vary geographically by region?
I put the ones that did, I kind of showed as 2. So it was that first one about the academic year, the one about the time of day. we saw there was one kind of anomaly, I suppose. In Thailand, we saw more people studying early morning, but otherwise not really. They varied by about an hour or so. I think we'd want to.
PC and the mobile phone one, pretty consistent.
Well, yes. Although, I had more information on the slide, but I took it off because I thought it might be too much detail. But we do. That does vary slightly. So there are countries where mobile phones are much less used to access our LMS. I didn't want to share it because I wasn't sure whether or not we'd. I don't know what the word is, but kind of regulated the data to match how many users there were. So, for example, France was very, very low on mobile phone usage or smartphone usage, but we don't have that many users in France. And they tend to be a bit older, actually, because in this set of data, the people using these courses in France happen to be the working professional sector. So it's a slightly different kind of demographic. That's the word. Yeah.
I'm really interested in this kind of stuff, especially in terms of people making assumptions in schools, etc., and like making assumptions based off things like, for example, a 20-minute thing. As somebody who uses VPNs to hide my location, and like I block almost every tracking thing on the web, I'm just wondering how, it might be quite a small demographic, but how you can get to those people. I guess it's in the views.
It is, yeah. I mean, that is still our main way of understanding. I don't think there's anything that can replace talking to people that use the material. I don't think we ever will. And I actually think we're doing that more than we ever were before. So interestingly, I think the data, and this makes me want to go back and talk to them more and more regularly, actually. Because I go in with my set of questions, and then I come back and I look at these facts and I think, well, I should have asked them about that and that and that and why that's happening. So yeah, I don't think it'll ever replace it, and it's just an extra tool to pull out when you're looking at your market research, I think. Yeah. Okay. That's it, I think. But is the time, have I gone? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you.